Relatively surprise announcement, but not totally. Bob Iger, Disney CEO, has stepped down from Disney. He will assume a new role as chairman of the board for the remainder of his contract, which is basically the next 2 years. And a lot of people are expressing some shock and surprise, mainly because Bob Iger has been such a key foundational part of Disney. But they're forgetting that this move was actually telegraphed years ago. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, this is Perch. Man, everybody's leaving. We have Dan Didio going, and now Bob Iger stepping down from Disney. A lot of people saying did not see this coming. Such a shock. Amazing. But most people actually could see this coming. So let's dissect the news just bit by bit. What does this mean? Does this mean anything for comics at all? Short answer, no, but let's go into that. So first of all, Bob Iger has been CEO for Disney for a long time, and in his presence, he's overseen some pretty massive things that people tend to forget about. He was part of the next generation technology, which really transformed the park. He was there during the period of mobile and how that played into Disney and all of its different plans, both in the park with movies and everything else. He oversaw both Star Wars and Pixar and a Marvel being both purchased and coming in and being major moneymakers. You got to remember when Bob Iger stepped into this position, Disney didn't own Lucasfilms, Marvel, and Pixar. That is not just a sizable; it's the major part of his business. Iger has been wanting to leave for quite some time. Now, how do I know this, and how could this be true? Because a lot of people are talking about how shocked they were. Well, the answer to that is several years ago, specifically 2016, so 4 years ago, a guy by the name of Thomas Staggs, who was chief operating officer of Disney, he was basically being set up to take Bob Iger's position. Bob Iger had been grooming him for this job. They had been promising that this was going to come. And ultimately, Tom Staggs left Disney and walked away because the board of directors would not commit to a timeline for when that succession was going to happen. But most people, including Bob Iger, believed it was going to happen in the next 2 years or so. At the time, Disney was starting to stand up Shanghai Disney. They were doing a bunch of pretty major things. Staggs was all over it, trying to expand the Disney brand everywhere. And Shanghai was kind of his big piece. This is gentleman, Tom Staggs. So, they were even doing earnings call together. I mean, everything was really teed up to do this. But when the Disney board said that Staggs wasn't quite ready, that he wasn't ready to step into that job, because they weren't completely impressed with how China had gone. There was a big period of uncertainty around when that park was going to launch. And they also knew that Marvel was coming up. Star Wars was getting its feet under it as a movie property. There was talk of, does Disney need to buy other properties? They knew that there were some major things in Disney's future. So Tom Staggs was kind of delayed. He wound up leaving, and that extended what Iger was hoping would be another 1 to 2 years back in 2016. So once Staggs stepped aside, we started to gear up for a new guy. And this guy is Bob Chapek. Now, Bob Chapek is he's been a big parks and resorts guy. He's been the chairman of Disney Parks Experience Products since 2018. He, basically has been a Disney guy. He's got a long history within Disney, definitely driven out of the parks and the entertainment side of the world. He has been really kind of heavily involved in the Star Wars plans and how that all rolled out. And so I will insert here as a little kind of an aside, as you hear people talk about how Star Wars and the parks are a disaster and licensing is going bad and everything else, keep in mind Chapek was somebody who largely oversaw both of this and really has been looking at kind of some of the bigger areas for how the park was going to expand, what's going to change with Epcot and so on. And so you look at that and you go, well, wait a minute. Why would the board of directors and Disney, with billions of dollars of investment in the line, replace the long-standing, quite powerful Bob Iger with a guy who ran a disastrous park? Well, the answer to that is the park is not been a disaster. Um, 2019 was a massive year for Disney. I know you've heard different things in lots of YouTube videos, lots of analysis saying that they've been all over, a complete free fall as a company. But the reality is Disney dominated the box office. They bought Fox, which was a major acquisition for them. They put a streaming service and in its first month actually did fulfill the targets they initially given to the board and then some. And despite everything you've heard about Star Wars and issues and everything else, they also put out In-Game, they put out Lion King, they put out Captain Marvel. They had a good year. Disney's annual share of the box office was the biggest it's been, period. Tickets sold to Disney dominated. They are in charge of all the everything it's been going on. Now their revenue and their profit are interesting. So their profit fell from 2018 to 2009. Doesn't mean they lost money. It just means they made slightly less than the 12.6 billion it made in 2018. They made 2.4. So Disney partially blamed this as the consolidation of the Fox's assets, needing to take on a lot of debt across their purchases, definitely the money that they invested into getting the parks launched and everything else. So that's when you think about Disney's free fall, a lot of people say, oh, it went down. The business went down from 18 to 19. Again, down is not loss. And when you're basically raking in more profit than you have in the last 20 years or so, or actually the company's history for that matter, $12.6 billion is a huge number. Going from that to 10.4 is disappointing for some shareholders, but that's not a disaster. That's not you doing poor. Now, where does all this mean for 2020? Well, you do not have an Avengers movie. You do not have a Star Wars movie. You have some Marvel stuff. You have Black Panther. You have Eternals. But it is going to be an interesting year. 2020 most likely will be further down in terms of profit. Now, that said, the parks are coming up, but ESPN subscribers are losing. The media business are not going to be as big as they were before. Pixar has some pretty major things, but both of their movies are Onward and Soul. They're originals. So 2020 is going to be a very not turbulent year, but it's been a year of new franchises. So the expectation that's been set with the investors and with the board and everything else with Disney, you're hearing it here, is that it will be a down year. Down does not mean money loss. It will be teeing up a bunch of new properties. And the way it's being positioned is, remember when Iron Man, a lot of these other movies we hadn't heard of came out? Well, we built from there. And 2020 is a building year. It's a building year with Disney Plus. It's a Disney year with their movies. If you think about it, they've got a couple live action stuff. They've got Jungle Cruise and Mulan. So that's a movie with The Rock. You've got a movie aimed at China. You have The Eternals. You have Artemis Fowl. You have Soul. You have Black Widow. So you have a lot of different kind of films. But chances are they'll do okay. It's not going to be 2019 okay. So what does all this have to do with Bob Iger? Well, Bob Iger, as I said, has publicly, this isn't a rumor or analysis or anything else. It's just literally reading what people say in quotes. Iger has been wanting to move aside. Bob Iger's contract expires in 2021, at the end of 2021. He will serve as executive chairman of the board, and he will help lead some of the entertainment offerings, to basically mean that Chapek is not kind of left completely on his own. Remember, Chapek is a parks guy. He's done a lot of this kind of operational work there. He's the right person to kind of take on this challenge if over the next 2 years, Bob Iger is going to be, as chairman, managing and just making sure that this Fox thing lands, that the movies are teed up, and everything else is coming to be. So where does all this mean for comics? Well, probably not very much, although you're going to hear a lot of videos about, rats jumping the sinking ship, and this is another proof that Disney is about to implode and everything else. But the reality is Bob Iger was trying to leave for roughly 4 years now. This is always planned. It was something he wanted to do. Him stepping out early is basically saying we're going to give a nice 2-year runway while both of us are in the role. Bob Iger as chairman and Chapek as the CEO of the company. That's probably the safest, best possible way you could do it. And no doubt the board, at least had some say in all this and how it was done. And we'll see. Chapek is a very different personality from Bob Iger. He's much more user experience, guest experience centric. So he's much more likely to listen to fan feedback and try and kind of steer the company in that direction. So that's going to be very, very interesting in terms of the personality type, what this means for the company in general. He's definitely more of a listen to what people say and then go with what works. Whereas some people have called it a meat and potatoes kind of guy. He does not believe in doing kind of experimental, weird experiments. But like all people in Disney and major corporations, they're going to nobody's going to come out and say, this is the end of all that experimental storytelling. He's not going to do that. He's going to basically steer the ship through these waters. Bob Iger is going to help kind of conclude his story on the entertainment side, and life will go on. Comics are going to be about like they have been. Expect to see, what you would have probably expected to see. We got a new Black Widow title coming out. Good chance somewhere around September, October, we're going to have an Eternals title coming out. I'm just crazy guess on my part, but I think you could expect to see that. Otherwise, Marvel and Disney are going to settle down a bit. Disney's not going to go out and try and buy, DC or Time Warner or anything else. They've spent their money on their acquisition. Now they're just going to try and lock it in. They're going to get prepared for, the big Phase 4 films. Doctor Strange is going to be the big one they're going to build too. And on the comic side, they still do need to make probably a couple small acquisitions to grow that empire and stabilize it, but Disney's eyes are going to be around digital and trying to figure out how to light that up, both in comics and in movies and streaming and everything else. That's going to be their attention over the next 2 years, and that's the change we're probably going to see. So is this big news? Yeah. If you're, a corporate guy following the stock and everything else, this is big news. But in terms of what this means for comics, probably not very much. Tomorrow's going to look just about the same as yesterday looked. And that's what you have. But maybe you have a different opinion. Let me know what you think. If you believe the sky is falling or this is going to be an absolute disaster, let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, would love to have you subscriber. If you subscribed before and for some crazy reason you're not subscribed today, check it out. You may have fallen off. And follow me on Twitter, Comic Perch. But otherwise, thanks for listening.